Good evening. I'll bring you quite a horrifying episode today, and I think this is the first time we've actually touched on something such as grotesque as this. We have with us today Yasmin Chowdhury, and I think thank you very much for coming on. I think it's very brave of you to come on to share your story, and hopefully there will be some people watching that can resonate with your story. So this is a trigger warning. If there's any children out there that are facing any sexual abuse, NSPCC, their numbers are going to appear on the bottom of the screen. If you're an adult and you have been sexually abused, please call if you're in London, Metropolitan Police. If not, call your local police force. I do want to dive straight in, but before I do, I'd like to shout out our main sponsor, which is Silent Majority Network, which is us. We're a movement that are trying to collaborate and use Muslim resources to work together and identify synergies for us to grow together. So please do sign up to Silent Majority Network. We're going to be a big movement, inshallah. Also, if you are looking for a spouse, find your spouse. They're a company that help you find a spouse. Great. Look at their events on Instagram. Now, without further ado, thank you very much, Yasmin. Thank you very much for coming on. I can understand that this is not only a traumatic experience that you've lived with for a very long time, but to come out in public and then tell your story, it takes great courage and strength. So we do appreciate that. I just want to introduce Yasmin. She is, and don't want to mumble this up, the chief executive of Love Dash and the founder of Amkariza Foundation.
That's correct.
Yeah. Just quickly tell us a bit about that so people get an idea of who you are and what you do.
So I established Love Dash in 2012. It's a British luxury brand, but we actually work to actually give back to charitable projects. So imagine if Gucci and Oxfam had a baby, that's us. Amkariza Foundation is a charity I set up prior to Love Dash, and it's named after my beloved father, Alhaj Abdul Mukid Chowdhury, and we actually sponsor and we've been undertaking grassroots projects out in Bangladesh, as well as some projects out in Palestine, just to give back.
Remarkable. Really, really good. Thanks for that. Now, I am going to dive straight in. So you've told me a bit of this story offline, and again, it was quite emotional, but I wanted it reserved so it's organic, and I want to hear it again for the first time. Really, I haven't heard all of it. Far from it, actually. You accused your cousin of trying to sexually assault you, precipitating rape, and you fought him off. That was the premise of what caught my attention and caught Silent Majority's attention. Let's rewind. How did you get there, where he was brave enough, or brazen enough rather, more precisely, to make a move on you?
So the incident happened in 2019. I would have been 49 years old.
Wow.
And that occurred in Sylhet, Bangladesh. He groomed me. I know it's shocking, because with all my credentials, I'm here to tell people that at any stage in life, when you're vulnerable and without family, you can be groomed. So the incident happened, and he didn't try to, he actually did sexually assault me. And I'm coming forward because part of that experience as a victim of such heinous crime, and the shock, is because I trusted him. And it came about because when I say he was grooming me, he led me to believe that he was my father/brother figure, because of issues where I had ended up being disowned, being obscenely treated and mistreated by my family. So when that incident happened, it wasn't just he sexually assaulted me, he attempted to rape me at the age of 49. And I'm a mother. And that happened in my late father's house. And how this came about is because I was vulnerable, because prior to that, my own family, I had started to challenge their behavior, because I'm now going to say that I didn't realize at the time, but I grew up into a very orthodox cult.
Cult,
I call it. And I've written about this in the Independent British newspaper in 2015. I call them ISIS Light.
ISIS Light?
Yeah, I do. Because actually, they proclaimed to be Muslims, but it took me a long time to understand that what they were saying and doing had no bearing and resemblance on Islam. And so what had happened is he attempted and managed to groom me, because he found out that I was being deprived of my inheritance. I was also battling to try and ensure that my beloved father, who died in 2004, demanding that his estate up to 1/3 be donated to charity, I found that they hadn't. And so I felt that I, as my father's daughter, at the end of the day, I have a strong sense of justice inside me. And given that the work I do at Love Dash is a lot of human rights, how can I do Love Dash when my own family are challenging me on issues that I can't sleep at night over? Because no matter what happens, I do believe that when I saw wrongdoing, in a way I'm a whistleblower, I have to call it out. And that's how I ended up being in a situation very vulnerable with my male cousin, who, by the way, I believe he was maybe 60. He's my first cousin. And he said to me, and it took me years, where he said, I will help you. I will fight on your behalf. I will, because we're coming to this, we need to talk about South Asian families and heritage from there and how it works. You don't immediately go to the law. You don't go immediately. You go to within your family and you raise concerns. And when you can't even trust your own immediate relatives, the only person standing there for me was this male elderly cousin. And I trusted him. And I found that he abused my trust. And it was horrific. And I did fight him off. And it made me think, if that's what he has to do to someone like me with a British passport in Bangladesh, what is he doing to other women? And why I came forward and I had to report him.
You've made huge points there. Again, I need to decipher that. So firstly, with regards to the inheritance, again, may Allah bless your father and grant him Jannah. With the inheritance, from my understanding, that's where the contention between you and your family started, and then this cousin of yours came to exploit the situation. So just briefly on the inheritance, what was the sticking point, and what was so significant, or rather severe, that led your family to disown you?
So when I call people like that ISIS-light, that's quite strong terminology, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to understand that many of us are growing up and we are victims of a culture where they worship culture. And they're not necessarily looking at the truth, which is laid down in the Quran. So I come and was born into a very devout Bangladeshi immigrant family who hails from Sylhet. And what concerned me is, I know it sounds stupid, like I was educated. I went to university, but I trusted my parents to tell me what my faith was all about. And what was really odd is only until my father died in 2004, I had no idea that women even inherited. I had no idea of the immense protection that Islam gives to Muslim women. And what happened is, it's been a back and forth journey where after my father died, and by the way, there's a separate murder investigation going on in Bangladesh about his death, despite all my education, my credentials, working for private sector, working for some of the biggest FTSE companies, I was told, this does not concern you. And I'm not at all money oriented, because everything I've done in my life, whether it's my property I've purchased, I've always done it alone. And also I contributed to the family. So what I found out later is, after my father died, there was a dispute over a curry house that my father had established in 1966. And it's still going, and it's called Yasmin's in Earlsfield. And that's where many of us, my siblings and I, grew up. And so I was shocked after 2004 to find that Islam actually guarantees and gives women their own inheritance. But that wasn't at the top of my mind. What I kept talking about is, I remember Dad, Abba, as we called him, always wanting to give money to the poor, always telling me, because I was the one who went into private sector, unlike my other siblings. Yasmin, my nickname's Happy, by the way. Happy, Baba, give back. I've educated you. He was formidable. He was such a woman's right advocate, because back in the 70s, and I remind everyone that I'm actually 54, right? Can you imagine? He came in the 1950s, late 50s, but he made a conscious decision to educate his girls, and he was very passionate. And he said, look, I want you to get married, I want you to get settled down, but I want you to give back. He was a philanthropist. So when I started after his death, slowly asking questions, I'd be shut down. And when I then discovered the truth, because eventually I remember even going to a Sharia council, that's when my family started to, like, I'm going to say my brother, who's 1 year younger than me, would beat me up, push me around. And what they didn't like is when I would say to them, but in the Quran, it says X, Y, Z. It says very clearly that women have the right to inheritance if they're a daughter to their father's wealth. And as much as you don't want to give my portion, because I haven't got it, and it's now 2024 and I still haven't got it, what about at the very least the portion promised to charity? And the response I got was horrific. Now, I'm not going to name anyone individually, but responses varied from, well, that's just the way it is, and why should you get it? And I kept saying, but you're Muslims. How can you contravene such a basic edict in the Quran? I even had one relative say to me, well, if necessary, I'll go and talk to Allah in my grave. But men and your brother and your male relatives need to handle this for you. And that's when I said, at the very least, you're not going to give my portion. You do need to give the portion that my father meant for the charitable projects. When they didn't, I then found eventually I would get disowned for several reasons. I went to set up a charity called Amkariza Foundation. I remember even a relative giving £500, I believe, to help me set it up. So I was very transparent. But when I did that and I was in my 40s, how dare you? How dare you have the audacity to go and help poor people? Do you think you're Princess Diana? I couldn't make sense of it. And that's when I started to do my own research, because I'd grown up imbibing a version of Islam, which again, it goes back, and I'd urge people to look up Yasmin Chowdhury and Independent and Google it. I did an article when I realized with shock horror, what they taught me and what was in the Quran was day and night difference. And that's when I said, no, as I bear witness, and I am Muslim, I may not be, some people might object to how I look or whatever, but I'm so passionate about Islam. I said, how do I answer to God on Judgment Day? And that's when I found reprisals, retribution. I was cut out. I was made homeless. I would find that soon, so homeless that I had nowhere to live. I was, like I said, pushed around, beaten up. Okay. I was slapped. I was called disgusting names.
Who slapped you?
My brother.
On several occasions, or?
I called the police on him at least 4 times, and every time the police would do nothing, because he's very charming. And
I don't think police rely on charm.
They do, because back then, this is back in 2012.
It's not too long ago. We hosted the Olympics then.
I know, but you see, I remember being a volunteer for the Olympics, actually. It's funny you should mention that. And I was chosen for the role of taking BMWs and driving VIPs. And often I would get chefs in the night. And it would be little things like that. A female relative of mine saying, oh, she's working as a prostitute.
Wow.
And I'd be like, but I'm going to the Olympics. Here I am in my Olympics uniform.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And I'd be like, but I'm going all night, because the Olympic shifts would vary. You would get daytime or nighttime as 24 cover. And then it was spread within my community and my family. Oh, she's a prostitute. She's going to meet men in the middle of the night.
Your own family was spreading.
But that was because I challenged them about my father, his legacy. And also, I would find in 2007 a whole load of documents which showed that he'd left the curry house Yasmin's in Earlsfield, Southwest 18. And he always intended for his daughters. And the problem is, in September 2006, being told you don't get any inheritance rights to that asset, even though I have evidence that I contributed. I was working as a 12-year-old girl in the cellar in a house in Balham, stitching clothes for Chelsea Girl, Miss Selfridges, to help my mum and dad out. My dad at the time had a big legal case, but I found myself in 2006 being told by a male relative, you don't get any rights to that asset, because before dad died, he whispered into my ear, make sure my daughters don't get it. So what I'm saying, the original question that you gave me was, why did your family disown you? Because I belong to a cult. I'm a whistleblower.
And I was saying to them, you taught me the wrong version of Islam and I will not have it. And you need to return to the original version. And you cannot question and edit instructions laid out in the Quran. And that's why I would find myself disowned, homeless, eventually my own daughter relocated to a boarding school to rescue her, not out of my choice. I went calling police, 999, nobody believed me, nobody would help me. It got so bad that even in August 2014, I found a famous charity. Again, I'm not going to mention. I went knocking on so many doors. There's a famous Muslim charity. I went and approached two of them. Some of the biggest Muslim charities, none of them helped me. So much so that police called me in on August 2014 and demanding to say, why are you upsetting and harassing a male relative of yours because he's filed a complaint? It was only when I opened my laptop and I showed evidence of all the 99 calls, because luckily the Met Police had given me proof, and it's called CAD numbers. Anyone who works in the police will know it's called a CAD number. When I showed him that, the detective just melted away and said, oh, because he realised that in that room, and right now, by the way, I am suing the Metropolitan Police. Their lawyers are engaging with me because I've presented recently almost 10 years of evidence how they've allowed my family to really torture me. They got away with undertaking domestic violence. And when I showed that detective back in August 2014 all my evidence, he suddenly melted away and he said, oh my gosh, he realised I was the true victim. So that's a very long answer to how I would eventually in 2019 find myself in a situation where a cousin took advantage attempted.
If I can just stop you there. Now, you've told me, and by me an extension the audience, a lot of oppression, as it seems, that your family have done to you and are they're consisting or continually doing to you right now. And if I may say,
thank you.
That again, firstly, I apologise.
No, please don't.
No human being should ever endure the torment that you have, particularly by your family. Now, I do want to say, yes, you are correct in saying that Islamically, daughters they do have a right of inheritance. And I did want to establish a fact. So your father, in his will, have you got that will? And if you do, we'll present it on the screen for everyone to see. Was that will ratified? Were there witnesses when he did write that will or draft that will?
So this is the tragedy, because separately to this, he had a will and he had a trust deed he was trying to do in 2000 somewhat with his then lawyers, Jenkins, O'Dowd and Bath in Earlsfield. Isn't it interesting to find that one of my female relatives was working for that solicitor firm, but I would not get sight of that will until 2007. So he did and leave paperwork, and then he left paperwork in Bangladesh, a will.
Who were witnesses to it?
I've got two witnesses, and I remember for the Bangladeshi will going and knocking, and this is what's really distressing. People say that they're Muslims, but I don't think they're frightened of Day of Judgment, because when I went knocking on one of the witnesses to my father's will, he would even open the door to me. Because by that time, when I went knocking, and this is where we're going all over the place, after I reported my first cousin for attempting to rape me and having sexually assaulted me in July of 2022, when I went to report it, even though the incident happened in 2019, don't forget it was COVID, very soon, within a couple of days, I would find my own brother-in-law. Look at him. ওই দেখো আমারে মারছে হাসানি And thereafter 2 years of attempts to murder me. So you would imagine why, when I went knocking on the doors desperately, while I was out, often stranded out in Bangladesh, Sylhet, and I would go viral, I found so much evidence that led me to believe, and I've got lawyers, and I think one of my lawyers is going to do a clip for you.
Hello, I am Mohammad Zakaria, advocate, Supreme Court of Bangladesh. I am representing Yasmin Chaudhry in Sylhet Court. She was charged under lots of false claim by some of her family members. Right now, here is 2 cyber cases going on against her, and 1 theft case proceeding going on against her. She got acquittal from 2 cases. One is cow theft case and another one is paint theft case. Actually, the thing is, she is unfamiliar to the court system of Bangladesh. That's why it is quite difficult for her to facing the cases in Bangladesh. Hopefully, she will be acquittal from rest of the cases. Thanks.
I would find such reprisals because not only did I report my first cousin for what he tried to do to me, I then found evidence that I believe my father was murdered for his wealth. And so I have the evidence, but you know what? I'm fighting a system that is set up not to represent the best interests of women like me because A, I lack resources, I don't have anyone on my side, and I'm a whistleblower. But the only comfort I take is to remind everyone, because I love Islam, I go back to the biography of our Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad. Don't forget that he whistleblew on his own family. Didn't he? He called out bad, unethical conduct in, was it Makkah?
Yep.
At the time?
Yep.
And all their work where they would get people coming to worship these false idols and they would collect money.
Yeah.
So it's been hard. Yes, the evidence exists, but without resources, without a network behind me, there's only so much I can do.
We'll certainly will publicise this far and wide, and our audience are definitely sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to your version of stories. It is worth noting, just for the audience's sake, that we've heard your side and how your family have made you an outcast and you've been disowned, not just by your family. You said female members have called you very heinous, grotesque names without proof or anything as of such. But I do want to make the audience aware of a website that gives another version of evidence or another account of evidence against you. And it's very important for us to level the playing field because we're quite objective and factual.
Absolutely.
So we will include that into the bio for them to have a read on that, so they get 2 sides of the event. And just if any of Yasmin's family members do think that this is, from your perspective, a false or a twisted version of account, we are more than happy to have you on. However, I do have evidence, and as we proceed and progress with this story, evidences will be appearing on the screen for you to absorb yourself. Thank you very much, Yasmin, for giving me and it's very difficult, and I appreciate you doing this, and my heart goes out to what you've been through and what you've had to endure. So on the premise of the inheritance that you are yet to receive, you were outcasted and you were slandered and all the rest of it that came on. You were physically abused, and the Met Police, you're suing the Met Police. Now, I want to take you to Bangladesh now, and I want to focus on the sexual assaults. What's your cousin's name?
Saleh Ahmed Khosru.
Okay. I am not saying that you're guilty, but this is a victim, and the victim is accusing you as her first cousin of trying to not only sexually assaulting her, but trying to rape her. And we are going to explore how he crept his way into your trust. But before we do that, it's also worth noting that the police in Bangladesh, this was reported, and the police in Bangladesh did do an investigation, and the report also would come up on your screen where they found no wrongdoing. But I do feel from speaking to Yasmin that they didn't, according to her, carry out their due diligence. And one of the first things that came to my mind is, were you interviewed by the police?
No.
So are you alluding that he bribed the police?
I have to be very careful because I don't have evidence. And when I don't have evidence, I am not able to make allegations. All I'm going to say is, Lee, let the evidence speak for itself.
Sure.
People should go and read the police report. I went and reported this. And that's why I'm now making a massive announcement to say that it's one of the most dangerous countries, because we're going to come and talk about what happened to the 8-year-old little girl in Mughra, who had a heart attack, and there's been an allegation that she was raped by her sister's father-in-law. She was 8. If that's how bold they are in Bangladesh with an 8-year-old, why?
You mean was it not India? Or was it Bangladesh?
In Bangladesh.
Was it Bangladesh?
In Bangladesh,
Okay.
in Mughra.
Okay. Right.
And it hit the world headlines.
It did, yeah.
So going back to the police report, I made that report, I believe, on July, I think I remember the 7th, 2022. I walked into Kotwali police station in Sylhet, Bangladesh. I filed the report on advice of the Metropolitan Police, of my MP. In 2019, I sought advice. I want to make it very clear that immediately I was told you're in danger, because when you make reports like that in a foreign country like Bangladesh, you may be under threat and you may get murdered or things might happen. Just stay and pretend as normal. Okay? Do not give any signs to your perpetrators that you're planning to take action, because if they get wind of it, they may end up murdering you. That's why while the incident happened in 2019, I was so frightened. I remember I even went to his daughter's wedding because I was keeping up the charade, because I was thinking if I don't appear, because he had invited me to his adult daughter's wedding, then he might think, oh, she might be doing something. Because after the event happened, his daughter's wedding was within a few days, and my daughter was also coming in because separately for Lovedesh, we had a appointment with the British High Commissioner, Robert Chatterton Dixon, who I also told about the event that had happened to me. So I've got all this timeline, all this evidence. But if we fast forward, what really shocks me is it would take me from 2019, autumn, and I'm coming back to say, I don't know how I did it. I managed to also, for Lovedesh, win a grant of £10,000 from the Bangladeshi Ministry of Tourism to host events. So while I was doing that, trying to promote Bangladesh, my heart was crying, because I'll come on to this. I work with a lot of charity projects out in Bangladesh. And I was like, this happened to me personally, but I must continue with my charity work. Just because something bad happens to good people, you don't just abandon your charity mission and your project and what you're trying to do. So it would take me until 2022, because we had COVID, didn't we? If you remember.
I do.
And all I remember was thinking, I need to do something about this, because what is he doing to other girls who may, because I'm a British citizen and he did this to me at the age of 49. The first thought I had is, what on earth has happened to his maybe domestic female servants or anyone who is at a disadvantage? It's upon me, and incumbent upon me, to report it. And I would find that the earliest I could report it was July 2022. And I remember meeting the police and they said, oh, we're going to look after you. We'll make sure. And I remember the police came to my house saying, we've got the report. We're now going to do an investigation. I said, I'll stay on in this country. I even ended up my daughter flying her out and had her 21st birthday in 2022. Because I said, this is so important. And then do you know what? They would never see me again. And then the report was issued, because the first I heard about it was through social media. People calling me a liar and saying, you're a scam merchant, you're a liar, you've tried to. And I couldn't believe it, because they said, there's a website called The Truth About Yasmin C. And there I would go and find, to my shock and horror, my absolute horror, because by that time, not only had I received an attempt to murder me. Do you remember I said, I think July the 7th is when I went to Kotwali police station to file on the instructions of Met Police. And I even had Lord Ahmed, who is at the time a Conservative politician. My MP had written to me saying, Yasmin Chowdhury has come to me and told me about this incident. What's the best advice for someone like her to report this crime? There was a lot of messing around between 2019. Eventually, fed up, the Metropolitan Police said, this is not something we can do through Interpol, because we thought we could report it. Then my MP said, Miss Chowdhury, you're going to have to go out there. So I did. So in July 2022, when I reported it on the 7th, within 2 days, on the 9th of July, in my father's house, in front of the village chairman, who I'd already gone to and said, please protect me. It was Qurbani, Eid ul Adha. And I said, please protect me. I've come to Bangladesh for 2 reasons. I would find that on July the 9th, my brother-in-law, and all of that is on justiceforyasmin.com website, he came to beat me up in front of the village chairman. And they all had to restrain him. And eventually, one of the members of the village council, Saad, his name is, he's so lovely. He said, don't you worry, sister. I was witness. I saw it. I had to pull your brother-in-law off you. I would then find eventually somehow the police report into the outcome of my report and allegation was published on a website, which is hosted by Squarespace.
And they found no ill finding.
And in that police report, if you go and have a look, there's no mention of me. There's no even mention that they met me. I'm just so shocked. And when I show it to people, this police report, everyone, they're telling me, not me, they're saying, Yasmin, is it possible that there's some wrongdoing and something very unethical has happened? Because when we look at the report, it's unlike no police report we've ever read in our lifetime. Not in any country can this be a fair police report. But it's a done deal. After which...
So he was exonerated after that?
Yeah, and I was facing a witch hunt. And then I would find rape threats, death threats. I would find accounts set up. And I believe it's orchestrated by my family. I even went to Squarespace and I complained to them and I said, what are you going to do about this? And they said, there's nothing we can do. And so I would find not only were there several attempts to then murder me, 4 or 5 attempts, all of which my lawyers can confirm, from being beaten up by a mob.
From whom?
So, for example, I went back to the village chairman to say, why aren't you helping me? And then, do you know what? I got beaten up in his office.
By who?
By his supporters.
Whose supporters?
The chairman's. Because I went in asking for help and they said, you're not allowed to talk about stuff like this. I can't believe it. I'm 54 now and I'm crying in this podcast, but it's so important. Because if I don't speak up, all I keep thinking about is I'm lucky. In some ways, I've got the British passport. I can escape. And yes, it was an incident. But how is this happening? By the hands of men who identify themselves as Muslim and women. And I wanted to add something else. I didn't go to the police straight away. The incident happened in 2019. Do you know what I did to go to family members? I left no stone unturned.
So you told family members?
Yeah. I even did a YouTube video secretly and I sent them, you can do a YouTube video because I was thinking, how, during COVID, can I speak to them? How can I get my message across?
When you say family members, do you mean siblings, mother?
Cousins. One of them was Faisal Ahmed Chowdhury, who is a prominent member, I believe, of the political party, Bangladesh National Party, BNP. I'm not alleging anything against the BNP. They have no idea. But I remember going to him. I remember having even a meeting while I was out in Bangladesh, having reported it and bringing some of my cousins into a room. Do you know what? They all left and wouldn't do anything.
Either the picture you're painting is either this man, I forgot his name now.
Saleh Ahmed Khosrow.
Saleh Ahmed. Either he's a very powerful man.
Yes.
Bit like Diddy, and I'm not trying to make comparisons here, and he's shutting people down. Or it's either that, where he's buying everyone, but it's almost unfathomable, almost incredulous that your family members, when you did report to them, and I mean your siblings and your mother, that they, showed you the shoulder.
So I can't answer for them, okay? And that's why I want you also to know, remember I said to you, I left no stone unturned. At no point will they ever meet with me. I'm going to put a challenge because for almost 15 years, I've been asking over and over again to my Chowdhury family, which includes my younger sister, who is nominated for an Oscar in 2024.
What's her name?
Yasmin Chowdhury. I have written, it's on and on, writing, because at the end of the day, I had no desire to make this public. Okay. But I am now, even now, I'm willing to actually pay for a meeting. I will be there in a setting with people. There's so many people who made invitations, they've been rejected. They won't come and ever face me.
We'll also put in our invitation. We'll
You
be there
can,
as well.
but I'm promising you, the people involved in this will never come and face me because they know the evidence I have. Because all I've been asking for is the opportunity. Because I'm like, don't believe me. Don't listen to me. Look at the evidence. I have receipts. And I would never go public without receipts.
Receipts for what, sorry?
Receipts in terms of evidence that I possess in that my inheritance was stolen.
Okay.
It's now 2024.
Right.
I even went to the owner of Yasmin's restaurant in Earlsfield and I said to him, you're a Muslim man. Do you not feel ashamed that you're depriving charity and you're depriving Muslim women of their inheritance?
Absolutely. If I can just take it back to, and again, this is very uncomfortable, but in order for us to understand the gravity of your situation and predicament, I'm going to ask you if you're comfortable with this, to describe the incident with this first cousin of yours. Only if you're comfortable. I think it would be of great benefit to the audience and really hone in your story.
So it was an evening in 2019.
Yep.
I'd arrived into Bangladesh.
Yep.
Because like I said, I'd founded Lovedesh. And Lovedesh had by then started to win awards and was featured in The Guardian.
Okay.
I even had an article in the Evening Standard. I won Entrepreneur of the Year at the National British Muslim Awards in 2015, or was it 16? In 2019, not just that, when I found that money wasn't being given to charity, I'd set up Amkariza. And do you remember I said I was challenged and I was told, how dare you set up a charity without our permission? At that time, my cousin, Saleh Ahmad Khosrow, started to say, I will help you, Yasmin.
So this is when the grooming started?
You are my sister.
Right.
In 2015, July, I was made homeless and kicked out and police were called because I'd been living with my mother. Prior to that, I had my own house. I've always built and accumulated my own wealth. I don't want to spend too much time, but I look back and I realize I was just a modern day slave for my family. I was either stitching at the age of 12 in a cellar, or as soon as my father died, I was running a job, and I would find that my brother had no job. And my mother was obviously widowed. I did everything I can to support my family.
Right.
And what had happened is I was so shocked to find their behavior in light of the evidence I'd found about my father trying to do a trust fund.
Right.
You know, the will he'd left behind. Little things were coming out after his death from 2004 until, say, 2012. And that's when my cousin, Saleh Ahmad Khosrow, who is my father's sister's son, said, I will get involved. Now, as Muslim women, often when your own family don't give you remedy, you are allowed to go to your elders. And because all my uncles by that time slowly had passed away, I then have to, even though I personally don't agree with it, I respect it. He's older. You go to the next older male relative.
He was 60 at the time, you're saying?
No. In 2019, I believe he was 60.
60. So 2012, he extended an olive branch.
Yeah, because there were things going on. Yeah, and I will help you,
so
and it's really wrong.
So he made a concerted effort for so 7 years he groomed you, is that what you're saying?
And when I say grooming, it's not obvious, but he's like my fufa, because, you know, my dad was his mum's brother. So the name is fufa. My fufa, I loved him. In 2004, I remember flying out to my father's funeral and he was crying buckets.
Right.
He kept saying, because he was saying, I'm religious, I know what Islam says, the Quran, it's disgusting. I'm going to have a word with your family, your mum, your brother, your siblings. My elder sister, who's a solicitor, had married her first cousin against my father's wishes. He's like, we're all relatives, we can solve this, you leave it to me.
That's the honourable thing to do.
I'm your brother, I'm your cousin brother, and you have no father, I'm your father. So 2012 to 2019.
So we've got the picture there. So in those 7 years, was there in any capacity where you thought that he had eyes for you?
No, but do you know what? he'd always say, "You're so special." But to me, that's what a brother says. Do you see? He was never, ever. And so that incident, that's why it shocked me and why I had to fight him off.
So that
because
evening.
in that evening,
Yeah.
I remember he came round for an invitation to his daughter's wedding.
Right.
And he said, "I'm going to be late," because normally I do not entertain.
And what
I
time
also
was it?
had.
What time was it in the
I can't
evening?
remember exactly. It might have been about 10 o'clock.
What,
But
10 p.m.?
Yeah.
Quite late at
but
night.
But in Bangladesh, they all do that,
Sure,
10,
yeah,
11,
yeah,
12,
yeah.
because,
That's the customary,
that's
yeah.
the customary.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, "Look, I want to go to bed."
Right.
But I had people in my house at the time who were looking after me. And they've asked me
Did
not
you
to...
have maiden servants there
Yeah,
as well?
but I don't personally call them servants, but yeah, I had people who looked after
Sure.
me when I'm there.
And were they present?
Yeah, but they were in another room. And the point is, they would always get my mosquito net ready for the
Okay.
bed. And there was a female and a few other people. And I remember saying to him, "Yeah, you can, but I need to go to bed," because also I
So
had
this,
a meeting
this was taking place in the sitting room?
Sylhet, in my
No,
father's
sorry,
home.
In the sitting room, which room was it?
In the sitting room.
Okay,
But
right.
what I'm saying is, I remember him saying, "I've got to come round and give you the invitation." And I was like, "Oh, that's so nice of you, of course." And it's like, "I want your daughter to
Sure.
be there."
Yeah.
So he said, "Look, I'm going around and it's customary." And I said, "Is this usual?" And I was told
Sure.
by people, no, it's customary, because they're running around giving all the invites. And in Bangladesh, it's tradition to give it personally.
Yeah.
He came round and we were sitting on the sofa.
Right.
And I was so pleased to get the invitation. And I remember it was a sofa like this, and I never sit close.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
But in order to show me, he was like, "Look at my cousin, my daughter's wedding." And I said, "Oh, look at it." Okay? Because I'm very, very strict. And at some point we're talking, and then we move on to the subject of the negotiations with my family. By that time, I'd also lent him some money.
Okay.
I think it was about £200 or something. I can't remember.
Right.
And I remember having a chat and saying, I'm all alone. I've been disowned. I'm homeless in 2015. But I was going to talk to him about giving that money back to me. Okay. And then while I'm sitting on the sofa, I remember I was on the right-hand side,
Right.
quite far away.
Sure.
And he was on the left.
Okay.
But it was a sofa a bit wider than this in my father's house, my late father's house, which I thought. And I remember tea was brought in, and then the servants, not servants, the
Staff.
the staff
Yeah.
who are, because I would go there just for brief periods. They'd retired in the next room because they stayed with me.
Sure.
I was too scared to live alone, so that I
Understandable.
had.
Yeah.
While I'm talking and crying, and I'm talking about how I need his help. And he's like, "Don't you worry, we're going to sort this. I'm your brother." Suddenly, without any notice, I'm 49. Because I was next to a corner of the sofa, far away, as far as you can get, suddenly he twisted his body. This is what I can remember. And he pounced on me. I was in such shock, and he held me down. And he put his tongue in my mouth. I was in such shock, because people don't understand. There's a moment of shock and you freeze, because I'd been crying and saying, "Oh, I've got my charity. I'm working with Rana Plaza victims, the factory that had collapsed in 2013, killing over 1,000 garment workers." And I'd met them in April 2019, and I'd done a t-shirt. While I'm just talking, he cut me off and suddenly pounced on me, held me down by my wrists, put his tongue in me. I was so shocked. And all I kept thinking was of my dad, and I don't know, crazy thoughts. And then what happens is the wind gets knocked out of your body, because obviously you've got a man over you, and he was pulling at my clothes. And do you know what the sad thing is? Yes, I don't wear hijab, but out in Bangladesh I do. And I remember I had a headscarf on, because when I'm in Bangladesh, I respect the local custom. And I don't know how many seconds it was, but there was a voice that said, fight. I think it came from God or something, my angel, something just said, fight. Kick him off you. And then, do you know what? I took a big gasp, right? Because at some point, while he's on top of me, the physical strength to try and push that off, I remember pushing and I screamed and I said, get off me. Because obviously I'm English. It didn't come out instantly. I said, get off me. Get off me. And I swore. And then immediately, he stopped clawing and he went frozen.
So you
It was
fought him
really
off?
weird.
You fought him off?
Yeah, I scratched him.
Good.
I scratched him, I clawed him, and then I slapped his face. And I said, how could you? But then another thought came into my head. He could murder you. It's really weird how in a moment of crisis, which is, you've got no family, your dad is dead, no one's coming to save you, and all I could think about is, I think my daughter had booked a ticket, because remember I said I had a meeting with the British High Commissioner to talk about love days, and all I kept thinking was my daughter. And she's coming out from London to Bangladesh, and immediately I was like, he got up hurriedly, and it was really weird, his persona. And I remember, because immediately after fighting me off, I got up after having slapped him, and I removed myself. Yeah. And I remember shrieking, and I was thinking, why hasn't anyone come to my rescue? It was silent.
At this moment in time, obviously you're screaming, you're...
No, it's very short-lived though, because what I'm saying is, as soon as he did that, it was all over, I think in about 1 or 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah. Because my ferocity of attack was quite significant.
Right.
Because luckily, I don't know how I got there, because in some ways, you can actually, you see, use your hands, because while someone's clawing at you, I don't know, it doesn't make sense at the time, but all I know is I managed to push him, and I remember taking his face and squashing it with my hand and saying, get off me. Yeah. And that's when he stopped, sat in the seat. I got up and I walked away, and I remember doing a walk, and I was adjusting myself, and I said, how dare you? How dare you? But I'd said English, and then I converted to Sylheti. And I said, how could you? And then, do you know what? He just sat there staring at the floor, and then he got up and he said, I'm going to go now. And then he just left. And that's when immediately I went banging on the door, and I'm not going to name them, but the people, and they said, we heard, madam, we heard, but I'm really sorry. And I said, I think I need to go to the police. And they said, please don't go. Please don't go. The biggest mistake, but maybe it was the right thing to do, because they said, if you go, you're British, he may kill us. And I took the decision there and then, and I said, okay, because I was crying. And I remember they made me tea, and they put me to bed. And I'm saying they, but I'm not going to name. And they were like, think of your daughter, think of us, madam, please. And they were touching my feet. And they were saying, please, 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 please don't report it. Please don't. Because if you do, you're going to go back to London. What happens to us? And I just looked at them and I said, and I had a flight to Dhaka the next morning, which I missed, because all night I cried and I didn't tell anyone. And they were begging me and touching my face and saying, please, madam, please don't tell anyone. And also, what if he does something to you? And I was like, oh, and your daughter's coming, isn't she? What if? And they went, we've heard stories, because in Sylhet, when it happens to girls, you can get taken out.
Well, there was a number of attempts on your life, wasn't there?
Well, when I eventually reported it, because it took me several years to go back and think about it. And I was told, and that's the first time I heard, that you could get assassinated for $25.
I don't think that's quite true.
Well, that's what I was told. I was like, the going rate.
And who told you that?
I won't say who.
Was
I
it a
can't.
man or a woman?
It was a man.
Okay, so that's just
I don't
a
know.
tactic to scare you.
Yeah,
and
I
to
don't know, but
suppress you.
but you got to understand. There's
Yeah,
this
no, I
single
fully
mother
understand. I fully understand.
who has no family,
Yeah.
and I remember crying that night and clutching pillows and saying, "Oh, Baba, why is this God forsaken? This is the terrible life to lead, and all I've ever wanted to do was do the right thing, and I need to protect my daughter who's flying in." And so, you know what? And then I was told. I only told about a handful of people, and they're like,
But despite
"Go back to London."
Despite that, you did
Go,
report it.
no, but they were good. They said, "Go back to London.
Yeah.
Get yourself," because they were very good advice. They
Sure.
said, and there was no lawyers. There was
Yeah.
just ordinary people, and said at the end of the day, they also said, "What if something does happen to those people who were in the house at the time?
Yeah.
You will also never forgive yourself." And I had no one to turn to. Had no cousin, not one relative that I could go to. So I was told, "Go back to London." And I thought, you know what? Good idea. That's why I have receipts where I told Robert Chatterton Dixon, the British High Commissioner. And that's why I'm very pleased to announce there's a investigation by the Parliamentary Ombudsman into the failures by the Foreign Office, because if you think that British people get protected when you report a sex crime, you are very mistaken. There is no help, because I would find they deserted me, the Foreign Office. Nobody wanted to help me. Not one Muslim charity, not one British charity, no domestic violence charity, not one person to this day, not mainstream media. Nobody wants to touch my story, because apparently it's too complicated. And the reason why I do this, and I'll come back to this, Ollie, because sadly, but weirdly, by talking about it, I also want people to understand Islam does protect women. Islam does not allow this kind of behavior.
Certainly doesn't know.
And by talking about the inheritance, the grooming, I'm educating and warning other women left without mahram when their father dies, their only last protective figure, what is in store for them when greed takes over. Because you may identify as a Muslim, but it does not mean you are following Islamic conduct. And so the horror is, I did go back to London. The only person I let know was Robert Chatterton Dixon,
Right.
who himself is now the subject of a massive complaint being investigated by the Parliamentary Ombudsman, which requires the permission of my MP. And the impact on me, when I finally find the courage to go and report it in July 2022,
Yeah.
without ever naming the witnesses, because I said I had enough evidence, because you know what I did? I even texted him and I said, and I've got those screenshots.
Sure.
Because I went back, you know what you did.
Right.
What are you going to do about it? I went to all my other relatives. Do you see? I've got all of that. And I was
Sure.
waiting to show all of that to the
Sure.
police.
Okay.
But what can I do when the police completed the outcome of the investigation without even talking to me or seeing my evidence?
And again, thank you very much for that. I think it's been very powerful. I think you're very brave. You've mustered a lot of courage to come here and do this. And I think we'll stop there. I think you've said a lot, and a lot of energy has been sapped because of this. And I thank you. I'm just going to turn to the camera. Thank you very much, Yasmin. So you've heard Yasmin Chowdhury's story. I appeal to the police. A lot of allegations have been made. Some evidence has been provided. We haven't obviously heard the other side of the story, but there is evidence that Yasmin Chowdhury has presented. If the police have concluded, the Bangladeshi police have concluded and come to an outcome, I urge you, for the sake of justice and seeking out justice, these are very strong, powerful allegations made, and this is oppression. Please revisit the case to see if you have overlooked anything. Please, for the sake of women in your country, for the sake of women at large, please have a look. And I'd just really like to highlight, I do think there is a problem in South Asian countries where women are second-class citizens, and we refer to that poor 8-year-old girl, this poor child, baby if you like, that was raped by multiple men, family members, to the extent that she had an heart attack. And I do I do hope those evil perpetrators are brought to justice, and if possible that the death penalty is applied. With regards to Yasmin Yasmin has made, and I'm talking to Yasmin's family here, she's made multiple allegations against you guys. If you do want to reach out to us, please do. We have been given and presented evidence. Again, the police, Bangladeshi police, please revisit this case. And if you have overlooked anything, please revisit just to check, because as you can see from Yasmin, she's very distraught, and we don't want to live in a world where any injustice is gone unnoticed, because we believe in the hereafter. And Yasmin has made many references to Islam. And just to reinforce to men out there, and she used cult, I would say culture. If you do think that by not giving your siblings, particularly the female members of your family, the inheritance that they're obliged to and entitled to, then you are doing oppression on yourself and themselves. Islam specifically delineates a percentage of a father's will to the daughter. They have the right to waiver it, but that's their right. So if there is inheritance to be split and carved out, make sure you give everyone their equitable share. On the back of this episode, our next episode will be with a specialist to talk about sexual crime against women, and we will look at South Asia and in this country domestically, and how groomers and women are preyed upon, and hopefully we can shed more light into this. I thank you very much, Yasmin, again. I do hope that justice is served, and I do hope the last decade or so you've been fighting for your inheritance, and this sexual crime upon you does come to a head, and that you do see justice in this world and in the next. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.